I have signed more of the galaxy into existence than any hand before mine, and I am telling this to the only listener that has never once been wrong about me, which is the record. A chart is not a picture of the sky. People who are not cartographers believe that it is, and we let them believe it because the truth is more work to carry. A chart is a promise. When my mark goes at the foot of a page, that page stops being one person's guess and becomes the thing that 10,000 captains will trust with their lives, their cargo, their children asleep in the aft holds. They will not check my work. They will not go and look. They will set their course by the line I drew, and they will arrive, and they will never once think of me, and that is the whole of what I wanted from my life. To be the reason a stranger arrives safely at a place he has never seen. I am Ashran. I am the ninth to hold the meridian seal, and for 400 and some years I gave the settled dark its edges, and I am the one who left the last one blank. You must understand what the meridian was before you can understand what I did, because otherwise it will sound like fear, and it was not fear. It began as fear in the others, long before me, but by the time the seal came to my hand it had become something colder and steadier, which is discipline, and discipline is what I want the record to remember, not fear. The meridian is the guild of the true chart. There are 100 authorities across the conquered that draw maps. Every trade house, every fleet, every settled world scratches its own lines for its own uses. But there is only one chart that binds them all, one page that every other page must agree with or be called wrong, and that page lives in the chart hall of the meridian, and no line goes onto it until a chartrite signs. We are not many. We were never meant to be many. The work does not want a crowd. It wants a few long-lived hands that will not hurry, that will hold a single ambiguity in the mind for 100 years if 100 years is what it takes to resolve it honestly. My people, the Ilmerk, live long and we forget slowly, and that is the only reason the seal came to us and stayed. We do not draw quickly. We draw last. For most of what is settled, the drawing is done. This is not boasting. It is simply where the work had arrived by the time I inherited it. The great arcs of the conquered were fixed generations before me. The trade spirals, the elder holds, the dead reaches and the live ones, the 100,000 named worlds with their names checked against the tongues of the peoples who live on them, so that no world in my chart carries a name its own children would not answer to. That was the standard. That was always the standard. You do not name a place. You find the name it already has and you write it down correctly. A cartographer who names things is not a cartographer. He is a conqueror with a pen, and the meridian has expelled such hands, and rightly. So by my time there was very little left to do that was truly new. I spent my centuries the way the chartrites before me spent theirs, correcting, refining, resolving the small honest disputes where two peoples drew the same star 2 hand widths apart and only one of them could be right. Quiet work, patient work, the work of a mind that has made its peace with never being finished and has decided that this is not a sorrow but the shape of a life well spent. And there was the blank. Every chartrite has known about the blank. It is the first thing you are shown when the seal is put in your hand, not the great arcs, not the named worlds, but the one place where the chart simply stops. It sits out along the trailing edge of the settled dark, past the last of the elder holds, where the star fields thin and then, for a great span, hold their peace. Not empty. That is the thing that must be said plainly, because it is the thing that everyone gets wrong who has not stood in the chart hall and looked. It is not empty. There are stars there. There are worlds there. We could see them. We could count their light. We had their positions to a fineness that would have been more than enough to draw them. By every measure we used to say a region is knowable, that region was knowable. We simply had never drawn it. We called it the trailing vacancy, which is a lie because it is not a vacancy. We called it the unnamed reach, which is more honest. Among ourselves in the chart hall, when no apprentice was near, we called it the blank quarter, and we said it the way you say the name of a debt you have decided not to pay this year. The first chartrite left it blank. So the story went, and the record bore the story out, though the record from that age is thin, and I have always half suspected that some of the thinness was made on purpose. There had been contact of a kind, long ago, not by us, by peoples older than the meridian, older than the conquered, peoples who are themselves now only names in the elder holds. And out of that contact the older peoples had come away with a single instruction, which they did not explain, and which the meridian, being younger and more careful than proud, had chosen to honor rather than test. The instruction was this: that region is drawn already. Leave it. That is all. That is the whole of the inheritance. Not a warning of monsters, not a tale of a fleet that went and burned. Just that flat, strange, grammatically peculiar sentence, handed down from peoples who did not frighten easily and who had no reason to lie to their own descendants. That region is drawn already. Leave it. As if the work we were the guild of had, in that 1/4 of the sky, already been done, by another hand, before we existed. And as if the courteous thing, the correct thing, the thing a true cartographer does when he finds that a region has already been surveyed by a competent authority, was simply to note the authority and stay out. 8 Chartrites honored it. 8 seals, 8 long lives, and not one of them drew the blank. They had reasons or they had no reasons. The record does not always distinguish. Some of them, I think, simply never got to it. The work is long and the blank was patient, and there was always something nearer that needed the hand first. Some of them, I suspect, honored the old instruction out of a respect they could not have defended to an apprentice and did not try to. And one of them, the 6th, left a single line in the sealed record that I read early and reread often and understood too late. She wrote, "I went out to the edge of it once and did not draw." She did not say why. She was not a woman given to leaving sentences unfinished. That she left that one unfinished should have told me everything. It told me nothing. I want to be honest in this record, because the record deserves honesty even when the honesty is unflattering. And here is the unflattering thing. I looked at the blank quarter for 400 years, and what I felt was not fear and was not respect. It was the small, persistent, professional discomfort of a man who has nearly finished a great work and can see in one corner a place he has not finished. It offended me. Not morally, I want to be exact, professionally. It sat in my chart like an unclosed parenthesis in an otherwise perfect proof. Every time my eye crossed it, I felt the guild's whole discipline reproach me. You are the meridian, and there is a region you have not drawn. And I told myself a reasonable-sounding thing, the way a man tells himself a reasonable-sounding thing when he has already decided to do the unreasonable one. I told myself that honoring an instruction you do not understand from peoples who are dust, on the strength of a grammar so strange no one could parse it, that region is drawn already, was not discipline at all. That it was superstition wearing discipline's coat. That the meridian's whole worth lay in the fact that it did not take things on faith, that it went and it looked, and it drew what was true and refused what was only rumored. And here, in 1/4, we had for 8 lifetimes done the opposite. We had let a sentence we could not read draw our border for us. What kind of cartographer lets someone else's unread sentence draw his border? I was going to finish the chart. That is the plainest way to say it, and I have decided the record should have the plain way. Not conquer, not claim, not name. Finish. I was going to send a survey to the blank quarter and do to it what the meridian does to every region: go, look, find the names the places already carried, write them down correctly, and close the last open parenthesis in the galaxy's chart before my seal passed to a 10th. I believed it was the last unfinished thing. I believed finishing it was the completion of 400 years of honest work. I believed, and this is the part I set down so that no Chartrite after me believes it, that a region which can be seen can be drawn, and that a region which can be drawn ought to be, and that there is no third thing. There is a third thing. The record should carry that in a hand as steady as I can make it. There is a region that can be seen and can be measured and can be counted and cannot be drawn, not because you lack the skill, but because it is not yours to draw, because it was drawn before you and the drawing was done by a better hand, and the only correct mark you can make there is the mark that says, "This was drawn already. I leave it." I did not believe in the third thing. I sent the Senate because I did not believe in it. The Senate was a survey bark, and I chose her the way you choose a hand for delicate work, not the largest, not the fastest, the most careful. Survey is not exploration. The conquered had ships that went into the dark for glory and came back with tailies. Those were not the Meridian ships, and I would not have trusted one of them with a chart drum. Survey is patience with instruments. A survey ship goes slowly, stops often, holds still for long stretches while the drum turns and the star positions are laid down grain by grain, and it does not touch, and it does not land, and it does not speak to what it finds unless what it finds speaks first and asks. That was the discipline. I trusted the Senate with it because her surveyor understood it in the marrow. Surveyor Ammon Kesh had drawn more true line for the meridian than anyone living but me. He was not young. I want that in the record because the tale would be easier if he were young, a bright, reckless hand who ignored the elders and paid for it, and he was nothing of the kind. He was old for his people, gray at the crest, slow to speak and slower to draw, and he had honored the blank quarter his whole career the way we all had, without understanding it. When I told him what I meant to do, he was quiet for a long time, and then he said the thing I have carried since. He said, "If it were ours to draw, Chartwright, would we not have drawn it by now?" I told him that was exactly the reasoning I was sending him to disprove. I told him the guild had mistaken a patience for a prohibition. I told him, and I believed it. I want the record to know I believed it, that we would go out and find, as we always found, a region of ordinary worlds with ordinary names, and that the old instruction would turn out to be some ancient courtesy long since void, and that the last blank in the galaxy would close under his careful hand, and the chart would at last be whole. He looked at me the way the sixth Chartrite's unfinished sentence looks at me now. And then he did as I asked, because that was also the discipline, and the discipline was the whole of what we were, and I was the seal. They went out along the trailing edge, past the last of the named holds, into the thinning fields where the chart stopped being ours and became only light we had counted but not claimed. And for a long while the survey was ordinary. This is the part that I think of most, because it was the part that told me I was right, and I was drinking being right the way a man drinks who has been thirsty a long time. Kesh's drum reports came back on the schedule we had set, grain by patient grain, and every world he laid down was exactly the ordinary world I had promised him. Nothing reached out, nothing warned, the instruments held. He drew a border arc as clean as any in the chart, and I stood in the chart hall and watched the blank quarter, for the first time in 400 years, begin to fill in from its near edge, world by world, name by name, and I confessed to the record that it was the happiest I had been in a century. The unclosed parenthesis was closing. The guild had been superstitious and I had cured it. That was what I thought I was watching. I was watching the outermost, emptiest, most unimportant edge of a region, and mistaking it for the region. The reports began to thin as they went deeper, not to stop, to thin. I have gone back and read them so many times that I could recite the schedule of their thinning in my sleep, and I will not because it is the one part of this I cannot make cold. A survey ship's reports thin for ordinary reasons. Distance, interference, the drum needing longer to resolve a crowded field. Kesh noted such reasons himself in his flat surveyor's hand, and I believed each of them as it came because each of them was reasonable, and reasonable things are the last thing a proud man gives up. The intervals lengthened. The grain grew finer and slower. And in the last several reports I did not see it then. I see it now. The tone of a careful man began very slightly to change. Not to panic. Kesh did not have panic in him. To slow. To grow careful in a new way. In the third from last report, he wrote a line that was not survey and had no business in a drum report. And I passed over it at the time as an old man's aside, and I have not passed over it since. He wrote, "The nearer worlds were unclaimed, Chartwright, the nearer worlds only." The last report was a position and a single sentence, and then the drum went quiet. The position was deeper than any of the others, well inside the blank, past the emptiness that had made me think the whole quarter empty, at the edge of where the true fields began, the fields we had counted from our chart hall and thought we understood. The sentence was this: I do not think this region is unnamed. I think it is spoken for. And then nothing. Not a distress cry, not a rupture, not the ugly sudden silence of a ship that has been destroyed, which has a shape to it in the instruments, a shape every guild learns to read, a shape I had read too many times in my centuries and would have known at once. This was not that. This was the silence of a ship that had simply, between one grain and the next, stopped reporting, the way a voice stops when a man in a room decides he has said enough and will now listen instead. I told myself a great many reasonable things in the time that followed. I told them to the chart hall and to the apprentices and to the guild council and to myself, and they were all reasonable, and I did not believe a single one of them past the first night. A careful man does not stop mid-survey. Kesh had never in his long life left a drum unclosed. If the Senate had died, I would have seen it die. She had not died. She had stopped. And a survey ship that stops is a survey ship that has been stopped. And the only thing in that quarter with the standing to stop the Meridian's most careful hand was the thing the old peoples had told us, in their strange, unparsable grammar, was already there. I waited. There was nothing else the discipline permitted. You do not send a second ship after a first ship that has gone silent for reasons you do not understand. That is not courage. That is feeding a hunger you have not identified, and the Meridian does not do it. So I waited, and the guild waited with me, and the blank quarter sat in the chart with its near edge freshly drawn and its heart untouched, and the fresh-drawn edge that had made me so happy now looked to me like exactly what it was, which was the outermost step onto a floor that had held our whole weight only because we had not yet put our whole weight on it. The Senate came back. I want to set down precisely how she came back, because the how is the whole of it, and because a lesser telling would make it a horror, and it was not a horror. It was worse than a horror. It was a correction. She came back under her own guidance, on a clean return arc at survey speed, slow, exact, unhurried, the way she had gone out. She was not damaged. Let the record be plain, not a mark on her. Not scorched, not breached, not fouled. She arrived at the outer mooring of the Meridian's hold on the schedule that a survey ship returning from that distance would keep if nothing whatever had gone wrong, as if Kesh himself were still at the helm running the return by the book. And she was empty. Every soul that had gone out in her was gone from her, and there was no sign of how, and no sign of struggle, and no sign of leaving. The holds were in order. The instruments were stowed. The surveyor's station was clean and closed as Kesh always left it at the end of a watch. It was not a ship that had been attacked. It was not a ship that had been abandoned in fear. It was a ship whose crew had, by every sign the ship could give us, simply completed their work and stepped out of the account. And the ship had been sent home the way you send home a tool you have finished borrowing, cleaned and in good order, with a note. There was a note. There is always a note. That is the thing I have learned and the thing I am setting down for the 10th. When a region that is spoken for lets your ship come home, it comes home carrying the answer to the question you sent it to ask, and the answer is not blood and is not silence. The answer is a corrected chart. The master chart drum was in its cradle at the surveyor's station, closed, stowed, exactly where a finished survey's drum belongs. I had it brought to the chart hall myself. I would not let an apprentice carry it. I did not yet know what it was, but I knew, the way you know weather before it arrives, that it was not for an apprentice's hands. And I opened it in the chart hall, alone, under the old lamps, with the great authoritative chart of the settled galaxy hanging drawn and sealed all around me, 400 years of my own hand and the 8 hands before mine. And I read what humanity had sent back. They had drawn the whole outbound survey true. That was the first thing, and it undid me before the rest even began. Every world Kesh had laid down on the way in, the ordinary worlds, the unclaimed near edge, the border arc I had watched close with such foolish joy. All of it was there, and all of it was corrected where Kesh in his care had still made the small errors that even the best hand makes, refined to a fineness past what our instruments could have produced, laid down not by our conventions, but in a schema I had never seen and understood at a glance. The way you understand a master's hand in your own craft the instant you see it, though you could never have produced it yourself. It was our survey, done better. It was Kesh's work handed back to Kesh's guild with the errors quietly fixed, the way an old teacher hands back a gifted student's proof. This is very good, here and here and here. And where the true fields began, where Kesh's last report had come from, the heart of the quarter, the region I had counted from my hall and believed I understood, there was no survey at all. There were no worlds drawn. There were no names found and written down. There was, across the whole vast heart of the blank quarter, a single continuous unbroken line closed upon itself, ringing the region entire, a border, drawn in one stroke, more perfect than any border in my chart or any chart the meridian had ever sealed, the line of a hand that did not need to stop and check because it had never once been wrong, and inside the line nothing. Not empty nothing. Deliberate nothing. The nothing of a page a mapmaker has chosen to leave blank because the blank is the true drawing. And on the line, at the point nearest our approach, at the exact place, a cartographer sets his mark to say this far and no further is mine to draw. There was a single figure in a script I had never been taught. I read it. That is the thing I cannot make anyone who was not there understand, and I have stopped trying with the living and will only tell it to the record. I read it at a glance, whole, without effort, the way you read your own name. It was not our script. It was not any script in the elder holds. I checked later every one. And it was none of them. No one taught it to me. No one could have. It was not a thing that was taught. And yet it lay on the page as plain to me as my own seal, and what it said what it says, for the drum is sealed now in the deep archive and the figure is still there and will be there when I am not. What it said was the old instruction. Word for strange grammatical word. The sentence the dust-old peoples had handed down and we had failed to parse for 8 lifetimes. That region is drawn already. Leave it, except that now I could parse it because I was holding the proof of it, because the grammar had never been strange at all. It had only been the grammar of a mapmaker speaking to a mapmaker. In the one professional courtesy, one true cartographer extends to another when he finds the other has wandered to the edge of work that is already done. This is drawn. The hand that drew it is competent. Stay out. Humanity had not attacked the Senate. Humanity does not, I think, attack the way the tailies want. Humanity had received a survey ship at the edge of a region it had long since finished mapping, and it had done to that ship what a great guild does to a junior guild's presumptuous survey. It had taken the work in, read it, found it earnest and flawed, corrected the flaws as a courtesy, drawn its own true border to show where the junior guild's authority ended and its own began, and sent the whole thing home cleaned, and in order with the standing correction attached. The crew, Kesh, and all of them the most careful hands I had, the crew were not in the account because a corrected chart does not need its surveyors returned. It needs its correction delivered, and the correction had been delivered, and the surveyors had been, in the exact and terrible grammar of the thing, reconsidered. I do not know what that word means when humanity is the one doing it. I have decided I do not want to know. Kesh asked me before he went, if it were ours to draw, would we not have drawn it by now? He had his answer. It was not ours to draw. It had been drawn. He went to the edge of a region that was spoken for, and he was the one who found out for the meridian at last, in the only tongue that quarter answers in, what the old peoples had meant, and the finding out cost him the account. I sat with the drum a long time. The lamps went their slow round, and the thing that came up in me was not grief, though grief came later and stays, and it was not fear, though I understand fear now in a way I did not before, from the inside of the discipline instead of underneath it. What came up in me, in the chart hall, surrounded by 400 years of my own true line, was the oldest feeling a cartographer has, the one that made me the thing I am, the feeling of standing in front of a chart drawn by a better hand than mine, and knowing it for better, and knowing there was nothing to do with it but read it correctly. Because the correction did not stop at the blank quarter. That is the last of it, and the worst of it, and the reason I have never signed a chart since. When I lifted my eyes from the human border and let them travel back along the outbound survey, back through the corrected near worlds, back toward home, back into the margins where the drum recorded the space around Kesh's own drawing, I found that the correcting hand had not confined itself to its own region. In the margins of Kesh's outbound chart, in the same script, in the same effortless never-wrong line, were small exact amendments to worlds that were not in the blank quarter at all. Worlds in the settled dark, worlds in my chart, worlds the meridian had drawn and sealed and trusted for 300 years, a position refined here, a name corrected there to the name its own people actually used, a border arc that 8 chartrites had let stand quietly moved 2 hand widths to where it truly belonged. The hand that had drawn the human border in one perfect stroke had also, in the time it took to receive one small survey ship, glanced at the junior guild's whole authoritative chart, found the errors we had carried unknowing for 3 centuries and fixed them. As a courtesy, in the margins, on the way to sending the drum home. They had read the whole chart. They had read the meridian entire, the great arcs, the named holds, the 400 years, and they had graded it, and they had returned it corrected, and they had done it the way a master returns a gifted student's life's work. Gently, without a word of praise or blame, marking only what was true and what was not, because to the master the marking is nothing, an afternoon's small kindness, and to the student it is the discovery that everything he thought was the top of the craft was a room, and the room had a ceiling, and the ceiling had always been a floor. We think we map the galaxy. That is the thing I set down for the 10th in the largest, plainest hand I have. We go out with our careful ships and our patient drums, and we count the light and we find the names and we draw the true line, and we believe that the drawing makes the region ours to have drawn. And all the while, out along the trailing edge, in a quarter we called empty because we could not bear to call it occupied, there is a hand that finished this work before our guild existed, that drew its own border in one stroke and will not be crossed, and that reads our whole proud chart the way you read a child's first map of his own street, with affection, and with a red mark where the street is wrong, and with no intention whatever of letting the child pass the corner. We do not map humanity. Humanity maps us, and lets us keep the chart and corrects it when we err, and asks in return only the one thing the old peoples asked of us and we were too proud to understand. That region is drawn already. Leave it. I did the only correct thing. It is the thing this whole account has been walking toward, and I will set it down, and then I will be quiet. The way Kesh's report went quiet, because there is a point past which a true record adds nothing but noise. I took the human border off the Senate's drum, and I drew it into the great chart of the settled galaxy with my own hand, as the 9th chartrite in full seal. I did not name the region. There is no name to find. The region's own hand told me what to write, and I wrote it. I drew the single continuous line where they had drawn it, closed upon itself, ringing the quarter entire, and inside it I drew nothing. The deliberate, true, correct nothing. And at the point nearest our reach I set not my seal but the figure in the unteachable script that I could read and no apprentice ever will. The old instruction made at last into a border on the authoritative chart of the conquered. Drawn already. Not ours. Leave it. And I sealed it. And I entered into the deep record, where the 6th chartrite's unfinished sentence waits, the finished version of her sentence. Which is this. I went out to the edge of it and it was drawn and I did not draw. Then I closed the archive on the Senate's drum, and I passed the daily work of the chart hall to the hand that will be the 10th, and I have not set my seal to a page since. Not from grief, though there is grief. Not from fear, though I understand fear now. From the plainest cause a cartographer can have, and the one I trust. I have seen a chart drawn by a better hand than mine, and I know now what I did not know for 400 years, that the whole worth of my craft, the whole discipline of the meridian, the entire meaning of the seal, was never in the drawing. It was in knowing which regions are yours to draw and which are drawn already, and having the discipline, when you find one that is drawn already, to lift your hand and leave it, and let the better border stand. I drew every border in the galaxy. There is one I did not draw. It was drawn back at me in a hand I was never taught and read at a glance, and it is the only border on my chart that I know, past all doubt, to be true. Leave it. That is not my warning. I am only the ninth hand to copy it down. It is theirs. They have never had to say it twice.